Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition, and we turned out upon 601, A Still Volcano Life. Now, in many ways, we are back to poem 175. I have never seen volcanoes, but when travelers tell how those old phlegmatic mountains, usually so still, we'll come to the word still here, bear within appalling ordnance, fire and smoke and gun, taking villages for breakfast and appalling men. If the stillness is volcanic in the human face, when upon a pain titanic features keep their place, if at length the smoldering anguish will not overcome, and the palpitating vineyard in the dust be thrown, if some loving antiquary on resumption morn will not cry with joy, Pompeii to the hills return. Now, of course, it will be that famous eruption of Vesuvius in 79 AD that will stand behind some of what we are about to read here. Now, Emily will have written 6 poems on volcanoes, the one we're studying now, and 175 being 2 of the 6. We'll get to the other 4 in a bit. Our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've worked through our set of introductory comments. I'm also hopeful that you've worked through the preceding 600 poems. We just finished with 600. It troubled me as once I was. Now, some have pointed out, like the scholar Wendy Barker, that Emily likes to identify with the volcano, and in fact the original word was volcanic, and she changed it so that it could be a symbol. We'll have more to say on it. We're also, some scholars say, maybe back to poem 479. She dealt her pretty words like blades, how glittering they shone, and every one unbarred a nerve or wanted with a bone. She never deemed she heard, that is not steel's affair, a vulgar grimace in the flesh, how ill the creatures bear. To ache is human, not polite. The film upon the eye, mortality's old custom, just looking up to die. And you'll remember when we did that poem, we were maybe talking about Emily's close acquaintance with Sue, who had that ability to have those sharp or biting words. Now, that temperament is one that we'll be playing with here. This is, in many ways, some scholars have pointed out, Emily trying to explain how she was trying to be a good girl in terms of her public persona, but in some ways it may be built up what one scholar has called smoldering resentment. Another scholar has called it this: Dickinson's revenge fantasy on repressive New England, end quote. With all that in mind, let's enjoy the poem. A still volcano life that flickered in the night when it was dark enough to do without erasing sight. A quiet earthquake style, too subtle to suspect by nature's this side Naples, the north cannot detect. The solemn, torrid symbol, the lips that never lie, whose hissing corals part and shut, and cities ooze away. As we've commented on so many of these poems we've studied so regularly for Emily, it's one word, and the word ooze here I think is a compelling word. There are some suggestions that she could have used slip, she could have used slide, she could have used melt, and she decided to go with ooze, and I think it'll be the perfect word for us when we get there. We begin though with the word still. I told you guys, 95 of her poems she uses this word, and I think T.S. Eliot learned this word. What does he say? All men ought to be explorers. What does he say in East Coker? We must be what? Still and still moving into another intensity. A still volcano life. Now notice again, not volcanic, because the adjective can't be the symbol that she wants later on. She in fact uses the word symbol. So it is a volcano life. In other words, sitting there, you can't often tell that Vesuvius is going to explode. You know that it is potentially going to explode, but it is for the most part still. And then of course, flickers in the night. Notice we go from flickering to hissing. Flickering in the night when it was dark enough to do without erasing sight. By the way, the side note here is that maybe endangering was another word instead of erasing. And then notice we go from still to quiet. A quiet dash, earthquake style, notice both capitalized, dash. And then she says, too subtle to suspect by nature's this side, Naples. Now we know we're with Vesuvius in the 79 AD project. The north cannot detect. By the way, when we get to 7 754, we'll come back to this Vesuvius reference, and one of Emily's most famous poems. My life had stood a loaded gun in corners till a day the owner passed, identified, carried me away. And now we roam in sovereign woods, and now we hunt the doe, and every time I speak for him, the mountains straight reply, and do I smile such cordial light upon the valley glow? It is as a Vesuvian face had let its pleasures through. And when at night, our good day done, I guard my master's head, 'tis better than the eider's duck, deep pillow to have shared, to foe of his undeadly foe. None stir the second time, on whom I lay a yellow eye or an emphatic thumb. Though I than he may longer live, he longer must than I, for I have but the power to kill, without the power to die. And so this Vesuvius thing, I think, is coming back with her use of the word Naples. In other words, people who live to the north, that is, are we talking about the publishing world here, maybe? Can't detect this Naples nature, as one scholar has commented on it. She'll call it the solemn, torrid symbol. By the way, it's interesting she uses this word solemn, because you'll remember that she called herself a somber girl in poem 593. Go back and look at that study. The solemn, torrid symbol, torrid will take us to 278, symbol, the lips that never lie. This is interesting. It almost seems as if Emily is saying, I have to tell the truth. I'm not one of those social liars of the north, those Naples-like natures have to be honest. They can't deal with the duplicity of those of the north. She says it this way, these lips that never lie, with whose hissing coals, notice we go from, again, flickered to hissing, and again from quiet to hissing, coals part, and shut, notice the use of the word shut at the end of the line, and cities, notice capitalized, ooze away. Now, much has been made of this use of her word ooze. She loved Keats's To Autumn, as we've commented in other poems. You'll remember the last oozings, hours by hours, from that classic poem. We've given full lectures on it at learnstrong.net. Again, oozing is a word, one scholar has called it sufficiently revolting. The root of ooze, you'll maybe recall, is a noun meaning sap or juice. And in that regards, I think it makes some sense. Because at 2a, I think her argument here is that all great artists possess this Naples nature, as one scholar has called it, capable of eruption, but often not always erupting. So I think Emily is a classic example of this type of brilliant genius poet. By day, she plays her roles. By night, she's writing her poetry, which is Vesuvian in almost every way. It certainly will ooze and cover and sink those cities that do not understand. At 2b, notice we do move from stillness to ooziness. One scholar has pointed out that Dickinson rhymes by opposites in this poem. Notice she'll pair night with sight, suspect and detect. She'll add internal rhyme of the eruption as the lethal lips of the volcano part and shut. And then obviously our inwords. Among all those inwords, only Naples and symbol end in an unaccented syllable, making them kin to each other. I think this is a brilliant observation. At 3a, well, we have other volcano poems. We mentioned already 175, we mentioned 754, although technically it is a loaded gun and not a loaded volcano, although Vesuvius is mentioned. When we get to 1677, here at the end of our study, interestingly, Emily comes back to several times talk about the power of the volcano. She says in 1677, on my volcano grows the grass, a meditative spot, an acre for a bird to choose would be the general thought. How red the fire rocks below. How insecure the sod did I disclose would populate with awe my solitude. We're going to have to come back to this poem when we do that poem. And then at 1705, she says it this way. Volcanoes be in Sicily and South America, I judge from my geography. Volcanoes nearer here, a lava step at any time. Am I inclined to climb a crater I may contemplate? Vesuvius at home. And then finally, 1748, right near the very end of our study together, she'll say it this way: the reticent Volcano keeps his never-slumbering plan, confined are his projects pink to no precarious man. If nature will not tell the tale Jehovah told to her, can human nature not survive without a listener? Admonished by her buckled lips, let every babbler be. The only secret people keep is immortality. I think also I mentioned T.S. Eliot's East Coker line in Keats's To Autumn standing behind some of this as well. Finally, to own a poem like this, what was a time in your life when you were like a volcano, and maybe even volcanic itself? I hope Emily is challenging and supporting you. Thank you.